We've already seen the screen when talking about the Object Explorer. If you click on Tables, you can then sort by extent and get it to tell you which tables are the most disorganized. An extent is the number of pages that was specified, that when a table grows it will add that number of pages at a time. And what you really want is to have the table in as few extents as possible, then it's not jumping all over the disk to scan the table. And if the extent size is defined too small, later on you end up with an excessive number of extents containing that table, at which point you'd want to reorganize that table, which is much easier in AGS. Do right click Reorganize on that table. First screen shows you a summary of the extent size for that table and which DB spaces contain those extents. Note in this area you'll see that in fact, done a different way, you can set up one job that reorganizes several tables at once. This demo is just going to be doing one table at a time. We proceed to the next screen. We then have a choice as to the method AGS should use to perform the reorganization. I'm going to show there's a few ways of doing it. I'm going to show just two ways. An in-place alter and HPL and express mode, more of that later, which represent the two ends of the scale if you like. In place, actually that is by far the best to do if you have space for a copy of the table in the DB space, because that will physically write out the table in primary key order, which can give you an additional performance benefit. And if you're selecting a group of rows from a table together in primary key order, which is quite common, then you get them all off a fewer number of disk pages. Just to run through that wizard, we'd need to tell it what extent size to use in future to stop it becoming so disorganized, for which there's a little wizard here in which you can estimate the growth figures and then have it calculate a suggested next extent size. With these small test tables, of course, it's saying that 32 is okay anyway, but to demonstrate this wizard we'll proceed through. That's the statements that we'll use. Now this table actually had no existing cluster index or primary key index, so it's just going to create one and then drop it. Yeah, so we'll go ahead and do it. We'll show you the extent to which that table was disorganized before and afterwards, and hopefully afterwards will be a very small number of extents. Okay, let's look at another way of doing it, which is what you would use for very large tables, because if that was the case you probably hadn't got room in the DB space for copies, so you couldn't use in place. You would also not want it to fill your logical logs, because the table could well be bigger than the logical log if you tried to just use load and unload. Then you'd rather fill your logical logs, or certainly generate an excessive number of logical log backups, and it'd be much slower. So if you use the Informix High Performance Loader, which from the command line is quite hard to use. There is an X Windows client for that IBM provides for HPL, but that's quite a lot harder to use than AGS, to say the least. Usually because of that, people rarely use HPL, whereas here we just press a few buttons and AGS does everything for us. We particularly want to use express mode, which would be for very large tables, it doesn't transaction log anything. But when you say you want express mode, you get a slightly scary window come up. The upshot is once you've done the reorg, you need just to do a quick backup. The fact is, whenever you organise a table, that table is going to be exclusively locked while it's happening, which means you've got to do this as a planned bit of downtime, at least at a time when people don't need to use that table. So if we proceed through, we need to tell it where to write out the unload files. We can tell it how many rows to commit at one time. For multiple CPU machines, we can have it do more than one unload file in parallel. So let's say we've got 4 CPUs, we get it to write out 4 files at a time, and when it loads it back, it'll load the data back in using 4 separate threads. Note that whenever you use table reorg with AGS, it will completely take care, if it needs to recreate the table, it'll totally take care of putting back any dependent objects such as foreign key constraints, views, etc. It's entirely done for you. Of course, for a small table this will appear to be slower than using the alter cluster, because clearly it's a more complex software task. For very large tables this will be freakily quicker, and that's really just using the power of the Informix High Performance Loader, which, coupled with the simplicity of the AGS GUI, is quite fantastic.